make it into the room, I think it'd be really nice that we've got something to look back on for posterity of this mental time. Okay, first up of our speakers is the brilliant Joe Lappin. Jay, I'm going to let you hand over.
Okay, Joe, I think I've unmuted you. I'm just scrolling down to the J's to make sure that I have.
Yeah.
Oh, Zoom's great.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Yay!
Hooray! Right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joe Lappin. I'm the Chief Executive of the Cumbria LEP, but probably more relevant for today's conversation, as Soph said, I'm the Chair of the Business and Economic Response and Recovery Group. And given that's one heck of a mouthful, we'll just call it BERG from now on in. So in terms of BERG, we're part of the Local Resilience Forum, which is part of the Civil Contingencies response to any emergency situation. So the fact that I'm the LEP Chief Exec is to some extent helpful because there's a very clear goal alignment between our day job on business and the economy and also the work of BERG. But BERG is very, very much a partnership structure, and I'm delighted to see that we've got lots of BERG members here today. So the job of BERG is very much about looking to make sure that we've got all of the necessary mitigations in place to respond in the first instance to the pandemic, but also to move to the post-response phase. And in COVID-19, I will use the phrase post-response because I think we are some significant way away from recovery. And it won't be like a standard resilience recovery. It will be, as we know, something that's going to go more like this in waves. So we've been doing a lot of work in BERG, flagging to government the issues that we think needs to happen to preserve as much as we can of our business base and of our economy. So that's a key piece of work around mitigation. And I can promise on behalf of Cumbrian businesses, BERG has been extremely assiduous and very, very committed to flagging those issues around products that we need, reviewing products and feeding into the system about what else is needed. The other thing that we've been doing is making sure that we've got very good communication mechanisms in place. So we've run numerous campaigns to make sure that we've had our Working Safely campaign, to make sure that businesses that can stay open know that they can, as long as they're complying with Public Health England and with social distancing requirements. And the reason why we felt that is so important is we know from our work, Cumbria will be one of the worst affected economies in the country. So the more we can preserve of our business base, the better, and the easier it will be to move into the recovery phase. The other thing that we've been doing is quite a lot of work on economic impact assessment. So that's really understanding what this looks like for Cumbrian businesses. And I won't get into too much of the specifics of this, but what we've done is a very detailed analysis of the 40 subsectors that make up Cumbria's economy and applied a vulnerability assessment to each of those. So that gives us a very, very clear sense of how does it feel here based on detailed knowledge and understanding of our business base. In addition to that, we've had a significant survey to really test the temperature of our businesses, to understand where they are currently, to explore what support they need going forward, and what help we can give them. And what we've been moving to more recently is very much starting to think about moving from response to the new recovery, whatever that might look like. And we've got a very, very simple model. And the simple model is about restart. That's really getting the machinery of our businesses cranked up again, reboot, and reboot is how do we get back onto the flight path for our local industrial strategy. And because we want to make this, excuse me, interactive, who knows what the local industrial strategy is? Some people, well, if Dan Visser doesn't say no, he knows on our Visser economy, I'll be very disappointed.
Yeah, don't be
the local industrial strategy is our economic strategy for Cumbria. And Grant as well, I'm looking at the page, I can see, will certainly know. That's the economic strategy for Cumbria. And what we want to do is make sure that we can get back on the flight path to that. So that's about rebooting our growth ambitions. And then the third strand is rethink. And I think what rethink means, if we look at where we are, the current pandemic has demonstrated that we have some issues around economic policy and the way that our economy is operated. So we've seen that we've got limitations around globalization, limitations around just-in-time mechanisms. You know, is it really right that we are bordering on being net importers of food, of energy? All of these things we want to start to think about, but very much to think about them from a Cumbrian perspective. So if we're looking at those two examples that I've provided, clearly we have strong heritage in the energy sector. If we looked not too far away from where most of you are now, Barrow has got the world's largest operational offshore wind farm. We've got very strong nuclear heritage, and we've also got expertise in new technologies. So we could make a significant national role around the energy agenda. If we look at food, we are exploring things like vertical growing options, which would bring a whole new dimension to Cumbria's food offer. So starting to think about where those new economies are and the opportunities that they present. Looking at that though, the other thing that we're very conscious of, some parts of our economy have been affected far worse than others. And the one that I'm very, very conscious of is our visitor economy. The visitor economy in Cumbria is 20% of jobs, it's 10% of our economic value, and it has been basically closed in response to government's requirements. So already working with our visitor economy sector panel, that's the sector where we're giving some serious thought about how do we move to reopen the visitor economy. And because the challenges for that sector are to go further than others, what we've introduced in our simple model is a pre-start phase. And we've had brilliant work, and I won't go into too much detail because I don't want to steal Dan's thunder. We've had brilliant work from leading lights in the visitor economy sector to start to work through what does the recovery planning look like for this particular sector. So that's all ongoing as we speak. The other thing that we've been doing, I've talked about lobbying with government. I'm part of the National Local Economic Recovery Group that's led by BAYS, and that's a dozen people who come together to really, really think about how do we address some of the issues and the challenges that we're going to face. So making sure that Cumbria's voice is heard loudly. Most of the attendees are metropolitan chief execs from local governments. There are representatives of which Cumbria is one. So really making sure that we're feeding into the system the things that matter to us here. Probably worth me saying about how does Cumbria fare when we've done our economic impact assessment. really sorry to say that Cumbria looks like it will be one of the most significantly affected economies in the country, and that's because of the structure of the economy. But before we get gloomy and downbeat, the thing I would say is that we've got a group of people who are hugely committed to developing a pathway forward for our businesses, to thinking really creatively and innovatively about how do we respond to the current challenges, but also come out of it with a stronger and more resilient economy, and looking to do the kind of things that we really wanted to do in our local industrial strategy, which was about selling Cumbria as a brilliant place to live, work and invest, and encouraging people, our young people, not only to want to stay here, but to encourage other young people to want to come and live and work here. So a lot to do, but very optimistic about doing that, and doing lots of plans to make sure that we are absolutely best foot forward in moving Cumbria forward. So that's all I'd like to say for now, Janet and Soph. Janet and Soph. And very, very happy to pick up on any questions at the appropriate point. And thank you.
Thank you, Jo. That was fantastic. Really well put. Thank you for that. Really clear. I'm going to leave you off mute, so but do keep quiet. We're going to go straight to Dan and hear from him, and then following Dan, we'll hear from Tim as well. Thank you, Jo. Okay, Dan, your floor.
Okay, thanks, Janet. Hello, everyone. Like Jo, lots and lots of people I know here, a lot of representatives from the visitor economy, and quite key, lots of representatives that I know and recognise from the supply chain to the visitor economy, which is something that's often, people that are often overlooked out when we do significant issues, but also when we're doing well, that can be overlooked. So hello everyone. Just going to follow on from Jo, just give you some background as to, from Cumbria Tourism's point of view, how we've got to where we are now with a media frenzy and a social media frenzy around a message or a series of messages asking potential visitors to choose carefully around their choices of destination that they choose to visit, particularly Cumbria and the Lake District at this time. And I'm sure if you follow any of the local forums, and I recognise lots of faces here, but only the local forums on social media, or have watched any of the news or follow any of the current media, then you'll see that there's a pretty hot frenzy around that. And our lines at CT have been red hot today, with people wanting interviews with us, telling them how busy it is and how disappointed we are that we've had a massive influx of tourists. I see Tim's laughing, he's obviously had the same inquiries. Luckily, we've managed to serve that one because it hasn't been that busy in the South Lakes today from what I've seen. So, but in terms of how did we get here, we're all very, very aware of the sort of 23rd of March and the requirement for us all to close down our businesses. We all know about that. And the support that followed with CBILS, support from the local authority with grants, with the business rates, the difficulty for those small businesses that pay domestic rates and so on. We don't need to go over all of that, but I'll kind of start with Sunday night. We convened a small group of us on Sunday night from Cumbria Tourism to decide on our position in terms of what we thought of what Boris Johnson had said that day, or what his team had said, and our position that we would take forward on behalf of our members, because of course we are a members organisation that's funded by our members, predominantly only about 5–6% by public sector. On that evening, after quite a long conference call and a lot of backwards and forwards, a small team of us decided that our message at this time would go against what the government was suggesting, or the government has said, that people could travel as far as they wanted for their recreation. We decided to go out with a message that stated that for the benefit of our vulnerable communities, which I'm sure Tim will talk about a bit later, for the benefit of our stretched emergency services, we would put out a message that said this is not the time for tourists and visitors to come to the Lake District, despite the huge draw of the lovely environment and landscape that we all know about. And maybe ask people to think carefully about their choices and the consequence of their choices, and decide that maybe a little bit later on, when we're more equipped to deal with visitors, would be a better time for them to come. Since then, we've had, in one of Joe's groups, you mentioned earlier, there's a huge battle behind the scenes, for example, just to get public toilets open. It is actually way, way more complex than I could possibly imagine. Conversations about public toilets are one that I try and avoid anyway, but on the one that we had yesterday, I suddenly realized what a job that they've got to do to get there, and how important those public realm and public safety things are to the visitor enjoyment, but also to keeping communities safe. And public toilets are something we won't go into detail about. So we decided at Cumbria Tourism to take that position. It was against the position of some of our local MPs, and we certainly had some fairly strong communication following that. It was against the views of some of our members. Very, very few of our members were strongly against the position that we'd taken. But the vast majority of our members, our local MP here, and some of our other MPs eventually decided to support that. The vast majority of Cumbria Tourism members are completely supportive of that position. And that's been reassuring. The press completely have been very interested in it, and we've had a bit of a frenzy and we've done a lot of press activity. And very interestingly, a lot of the DMOs, destination management or marketing organizations around the country, have also taken the same view and taken the same position. Interestingly, in the Telegraph today, there's an article about how hostile the Lake District is for visitors, sitting alongside an article about how welcoming the Cotswolds is. Get yourself here to the Cotswolds now while you're welcome, kind of thing, which is fine. And every destination has to make their own choice. I still believe that we made the right choice. Backing that up, and very much in line with the work that Joe's doing at the Local Enterprise Partnership, is a whole program of support for our members and other businesses to get open when the time's right and the legislation allows. So there's a huge amount of work going on behind the scenes with our members, trying to support them with, point them in the right direction of content and help and support. There's about to be distributed by Visit Britain a kite mark or charter mark or set of standards that they're hoping most of the visitor economy businesses will work to, and will help support customers' choices and give customers reassurance and visitors reassurance that those businesses that are part of it are safe, responsible, and will be able to help people enjoy their visit to the Lake District. And then when it's right, there is also a marketing campaign and a communications campaign to actually attract people to come here. Yeah. Once they've been to the Cotswolds this week, they can go to the Lake District in August or September maybe. And there's a big set of work around that, and that's in the background being prepared as we speak. And finally, we almost go back to the support phase, because we're all very pleased that the furlough scheme is going to last until the end of October, which traditionally is when our busy season finishes. So we need to look out for those businesses that are going to be back into a very tricky situation when the furlough scheme ends at the end of October. So that's a very quick summary of the work going on at Cumbria Tourism.
Okay, Dan, thank you very much. I mean, obviously lots to go on there. I know, looking at some of the questions that we've already had pre-submitted, there are a lot of queries about the sort of things you've been talking about. Obviously, everyone knows about the huge issues in relation to what the government's message was on Sunday and the impact that has for Cumbria. So there are a few questions that are coming up that we'll want you to speak about that in a bit more detail. And obviously, it's a big balancing act, this whole opening up the major concerns that we have and the hostility towards visitors. So we will be coming back to you shortly. We're going to go on to Tim with his very snazzy haircut. Tim, we've already had a question saying, Biggest question of the day. How did Tim manage to get such a snazzy haircut in lockdown? So I don't know whether you want to start with that or whether you want to on more serious issues, but I thought I'd mention it.
Yeah, well, Janet and Soph, thanks for doing this. And it's brilliant to see you all. Thank you, Joe and Dan as well. It was a 3-person job, this. It involved me, my 16-year-old and my 30-year-old. And, it's not too bad, given I've not got much hair, to kind of cut in the first place, it's all right. So thank you very much. I'm very, very grateful. It's why I'm standing away or sitting away from the screen, though, so you can't see it in detail. So first thing, thanks to the gin. I want to, you know why you should know this, but New Year's Eve 1987, I had a very, 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 very disturbing experience with gin. I've never touched it since, so thanks for unearthing those dark memories. Secondly, today was the only reason I'm wearing a tie, by the way, is because today's been a really peculiar day. I have just spoken from this very corner of the room on this iPad in the House of Commons on the agriculture bill. And it means that was it's the first day for 50 days probably, where a sizable proportion of my working day has been on something that's not directly COVID related. And even the correspondence over the weekend, if you have been following the agriculture bill and it's something you're interested in, you'll be aware of it. If it's not, just so you know, it's the first bit of serious legislation that's gone through the virtual parliament. And it's, it's significant to Cumbria. Happy to take questions if you're interested in it later on. But just to say, it just made me think. This morning, we had our morning team call, going through all the correspondence we got. And for once and for the first time, and I suspect for the last time for a while, the majority of stuff in the inbox, at least for one day, wasn't to do with the coronavirus or the response to it. And it's just a reminder of two things. One is that there will be a future beyond the coronavirus, however far away it might be. And secondly, by goodness, how much it's taking up of everybody's time now. And there's lots of, positives we can find in all this and all the rest of it. But when all said and done, so the nature of my role, absolutely right to say I haven't been in Westminster for weeks upon weeks. Generally speaking, the way I balance my time is I always say I spend my time up here trying to listen, trying to find out the issues people are concerned about, big or small, gather the ammunition, if you like, go down to London and fire the ammunition. And so it's about, I suppose for me, the last few weeks, insofar as you're interested, it's finding new ways of listening and finding new ways of communicating. And the first thing I'll just say, just a couple of political observations. The first is this, and I want you to be encouraged by this to a degree, is that I have rarely found it a time, because the government, like any other government would be in these circumstances, is making it up almost a day at a time. Anybody would be, and certainly they would have been in the first few weeks. I tend to find that if you constructively say to the government, look, thanks for that, but wouldn't it be great if you did that as well, or that instead, they do listen. And there's been a lot of changes, not always as quick as we wanted. The self-employed grant stuff has not materialised yet, but it is promised, and it wasn't in existence at all earlier on. Furlough scheme happened when that was not certain earlier on. The potential closure, we're trying to make sure that we get this out to people as soon as possible, but those people with small B&Bs who work in shared spaces, who are home-based businesses, directors of small limited companies who were falling through the gaps altogether. So I think, to be really fair to the government, after it takes some pressing and some persuading, but people are listening. So there is a sense in which this feels a very constructive time, that you find out a problem, you listen to people, you discover what the problem is, and you try and then get it fixed. And ministers will sometimes at least listen, and you see changes. I think the other thing that's just worth saying politically is that I will just say this, I'm the only non-government MP in the county, and that strikes me as being a colossal responsibility, because the way politics tends to work is that members of parliament of a government party tend not to speak out publicly when there are issues, whatever they might be. Doesn't mean they're not working hard, but they tend not to speak out publicly. So if you're the only opposition MP in the county, that's a colossal responsibility not to abuse. not to be a contrarian, angry, oppositionalist, throw bricks at the government just because of the government type person, and get the tone right, and to remember we have got a common enemy, and it is the virus and its consequences, which are, you know, manifold. And so see the government, I guess there's a real role in challenging, critiquing the government and helping them to be better, because we're all better when we have a bit of scrutiny, but not to use this as politics as usual. And I hope I've managed to do that. And that's certainly, I consciously attempt to do that every day. And I draw people, I have, you know, ticked people off who I consider to have forgotten that tone and forgotten that, you know, that primary responsibility. Loads of issues. I want to just say, for everybody, I'm talking now to people from different walks of life, from different business backgrounds, some mildly affected, some absolutely closed down and horrendously affected, some for whom there's been no support whatsoever yet at all, although I'm doing everything I can to try and make sure that it is coming. And just to follow on what Dan was saying about Cumbria Tourism, is what colossal team players people have been. You know, it's all very well, you know, standing up and me saying, please don't come to the lakes just yet, it's not safe. Doesn't cost me, but it's costing some people on this call and some people in Cumbria Tourism who have, for the safety and for the good of their neighbours and everybody else, and the visitors as well, have been advocating something that in the short term is actually damaging to them. And I will not forget that, and we will not forget that. I think that it's important when we're thinking about the overall issue. Everybody, just like everybody was a Brexit expert until recently, now we all know everything about epidemiology, and we don't really, do we? But when you listen to the experts, you get the sense that the best guess, their best estimates, is that maybe 10 million Brits have had the disease, half of whom have been symptom-free and hardly know about it. And the actual death rate is about half of 1%. However, here in South Lakeland, for a couple of reasons, but essentially because our average age is 10 years above the national average age, the death rate here is tragically higher. You know, I try and write to everybody I know who's lost a loved one, and there's not a day that goes by when I don't write a handwritten letter to someone. And that kind of sense of human cost is immense. And it's a reminder that unwinding too soon is not just, you know, potentially utterly tragic. It also is potentially really bad news for us economically. I was talking to somebody who many of you know, might even be on this call, very involved in the tourism industry, let's put it that way, who said, look, I'm losing X a week by this, but I know that if we unwind too early, it'll be lockdown, open, lockdown, open, lockdown, and that is far worse. That is far worse. So I think being cautious about the lockdown whilst not being naive that there will come a moment where we have to ease things off, I think that's colossally important. And I guess, you know, in terms of my role, and it's just something to say to you just generally, we have found good ways of listening. I mean, my caseworking load was high to start off with. It increased 5-fold in the first few weeks. It's now down to 3-fold upon what it normally is. But it's a massive privilege to get alongside people who are in desperate need often. You know, the complexity and the seriousness of the issues we're dealing with, I don't need to tell you about. It's huge, but it's a privilege to be able to sit alongside people virtually and try and fix them. We will get through this. I've got 3 teenage kids. I'm trying to, you know, encourage that, you know, to actually do some work at the moment. Given that 2 of them were going to do GCSEs and A-level, that's quite challenging. Mm-hmm. And amongst the things that I've set them to do is a kind of lockdown log, and to balance out the pros and the cons, and then to draw out what happens next. And there are possibilities, quite serious possibilities, that might lead to the UK and indeed, you know, human society being quite different as a consequence of all this. And let's be honest, in the short run, and possibly the next 2-3 years, the ability for people to go on holiday overseas is possibly going to be properly kiboshed. And so the opportunity for the Lakes hospitality and indeed the Yorkshire Dales Cumbrian hospitality industry to revive quickly is there. But anyway, I just want to say a massive thank you to you all. I will shut up now. Happy to take whatever questions.
Tim, brilliant. Thank you very much. Reassuring, I think, to hear that you're looking at this, your perspective that it's a really constructive time. Yeah, the whole approach that, yes, it's difficult for government, but just going in there and slamming them is not the answer. And I, for one, am actually really quite enjoying the virtual parliament and not having to deal with all the carry-on that we're normally subjected to. So it's quite a relief. But yeah.
Looking up MPs' noses. It's terrible, isn't it? So, just looking up MPs' noses. Things like that there.
Yes, that's the whole thing. So yeah, it's been really interesting hearing what you've got to say. We are going to move into questions shortly. I've got Fraser, Hannah prepared to go with the first question. I'm just going to check in with Soph. Are you unmuted, Soph? Is there anything that you want to add at this point? No, she's shaking her head like, why would I? Leave me alone, Janet. Okay, so we've got a whole pile of questions. On Saturday afternoon when we sent the last email that basically nobody seemed to get. We don't know where it went. It went somewhere into the email ether. But they've been flooding in since Sunday and Monday, and we've got quite a few to get through. And of course, if there's any more that people want to add, then please do put them in the chat and we will try and get to them. What I'm going to do is unmute you. It takes a second for the unmute to work. Once you've been unmuted, please just read out your question or ask your question and just let us know if it's to all the panel, any member of the panel or a specific member of the panel. So Fraser Hannah from One Back Creative, you are up first. Here we go.
Thank you. My question is really for Tim. I've got a concern with the litigious society that we live in. As an employer, we have an office and it's nigh on impossible for us to social distance. Anyone working in an office, just an office environment is not conducive to, it's an enclosed environment. And my concern is if we want to get back to business, and get back to work, how are we going to be protected from, spurious litigation with people saying, my partner became ill, you're responsible because they caught it in your office, especially as transmission is asymptomatic. So someone could come in, infect the whole office without us even knowing.
Brilliant question, Fraser. Janet, shall I deal with them one by one?
Yes, please.
Yeah, great. Fraser, I mean, obviously the first thing to do is to train the parrot to read out the small print. So that's solved. But no, it's a really good point. And funny enough, I was talking to, I had a Zoom call with the primary school head teachers a few days ago about the situation they face, and that's exactly one of the issues they raise. That there's a health and safety safeguarding issue. If you open up your school and somebody contracts it, and how could you prove it was got from that particular location? So that is an issue. I think first of all, the point of a pandemic is that it is everywhere. And it's hard to point the actual point, and it will be impossible to pinpoint where a person contracted it. I think that to be deliberately reckless would be a thing that potentially might contravene health and safety rules and so on, environmental standards. But I don't think you could be held to account for a specific individual's contraction of it, because there's no way of proving that you got it in X place or Y place. I am not a lawyer, and I think that, but when the guidance goes forward, then there needs to be, particularly as we do reopen, there has to be extremely clear guidance. I've just seen a chat thing, I think from Joe, saying there may be some guidance out there already, but it's a really important point, and it will hold back some businesses and schools if they aren't satisfied and confident in the guidance.
I was actually, Tim, talking about guidance on discretionary grants that's on its way, but Fraser's question, one of you'll have seen this week that there have been 8 sets of guidance that have come out for different working environments, which includes the risk assessment process, the reasonable steps you need to take. They've been released by government. One of the key questions that was asked, because I was one of the consultees commenting on the guidance, is that the issue of insurance and liability needed to be really thought about, so that people didn't feel that they were being asked to make very, very difficult decisions. And the guidance very clear is that people do need to feel very comfortable about when they can go back to work. And I think on furloughing, the fact that there's potential for part-time that's going to come in over the next couple of months will allow people to gradually build up their workforce in a way that will allow them to make sure that they can do some of the social distancing. At headline level, though, for offices, the guidance is very clear. If you don't need to go into the office to work, please continue to stay at home for as long as possible. But very happy offline to have a very, very detailed conversation on the guidance. And I'll share with Janet and Soph the link to the 8 different working environments.
Thank you, Jo. And we in turn will also make sure that we get those links out to everybody as well. Fraser, are you okay there? Does that answer your question? I know we've also got a couple of lawyers I've seen in the room. So if you do want any, if I can put them on the spot, if you want me to, then we will. Are you okay?
Yeah, no, I think that's fairly clear.
Okay, thanks, Fraser. Okay, so we've got lots and lots of questions about funding. I know a couple have just come up, just seen Rachel Bell mention one, and Jo, thanks for giving a very quick response there. There's quite a few questions on the different funding arms, and I've got Scarlett Mayer and Bex, I think, from Method, the lovely Method Cafe in Kendal, who have asked a question about funding. So I'm going to unmute you, Scarlett. I don't know if Bex is with you, but hi to both of you. And if you can put your question, that would be great.
Hi, yeah, Bex is here with me. Hello? Yeah, I'm here. Hi, yeah, so obviously we've been closed since 23rd of March. And for our business going forward, the grant was really essential for us. And as we were in a shared space, unfortunately, we've sort of fallen through the cracks of the grant because we're not the business rates account holder. We do pay business rates, but as we're not the account holder, we haven't got the grant, unfortunately. I've seen that there's been some new grants announced based on the local council discretion and stuff like that. I just wanted to know if there's any more information on this and how we can apply and what's happening really with the South Lakeland Council for that.
Want me to come in?
Sorry, go on, Jo.
Scarlett, really sorry to hear that you missed out on the basic guidance, but one of the things we flagged was all of the businesses that were falling through the gaps, and that included businesses in shared premises where they weren't the ratepayer. So in terms of the expected guidance that we're getting from government on the new discretionary scheme, that's looking at businesses exactly like yourself, where you are part of a shared premises. It's looking at businesses that are basically falling through the gaps because people have decided, for instance, a B&B to pay council tax on the basis of their accountant's advice, etc. So there are numerous types of businesses that have fallen through the gaps. The idea of the discretionary scheme is to address those gaps. But the other thing as well is that we are working with the 6 districts to say, can we have some consistency across Cumbria, so that if you're on one side of the road you don't get something, and if you're on the other side of the road you do, because that's not going to help. So the feedback from our district colleagues is that they very, very much do want to work together within the framework of the discretionary guidance to do things that are consistent across Cumbria. And the other really good piece of news today is Tim mentioned support for self-employed. That was due to come out in June. It's actually open today, and HMRC have promised for anyone that's self-employed and waiting for the self-employed grant to be available, that if you get your claim in the next few days, they will pay you by the 25th of May, which is, whilst still late in the day for some people, it's a lot earlier than we were expecting. So another piece of news for business people, which is very helpful. Thanks, Janet.
That's all right, Jo. Can I just, I'm going to ask Tim if he's got anything to add to that, but just before I do, talking about the self-employed grant, we were fortunate enough, myself and my husband, not myself and Soph, but we were fortunate enough to be among the first to get to access the portal today. And we were on at midday, and it took us about 2 hours because it kept crashing. So the only thing I would say is that there are a lot of people actually trying to go on as soon as it opens for them to be able to.
Not surprised.
And it was crashing constantly, but bear with it. Once it was done, it only took a few minutes in the actual doing, once you got through that first stage, and they gave you your figure straight away and said that it would be paid within 6 working days. So fingers crossed, it is on its way.
Yeah.
Tim, did you add anything to that in terms of Scarlet?
Just to Scarlet, really, yes. So Joe's absolutely right. So what the government announced was a chunk of money, 617 million, to be spread across England, and that would be specifically for, or rather not specifically, quite the obvious, or the opposite, sort of generally for those people who've fallen through the gaps. And so small B&Bs that pay council tax, people in shared premises, people whose business premises is basically their kitchen table, and the all limited companies where you pay yourself a small dividend rather than a wage. And that's not an exhaustive list. They're just the 4 most typical groups of people who'd missed out. So that was announced by the government about a week and a half ago. The money has not landed yet, and we don't know exactly what proportion, what amount of money South Lakeland will get. So there are 400 small B&Bs in the district, and so if we get a pro rata amount of money, about £1.5 million, and it will all go on the small B&Bs. So the good news is, two things. We're asking the government for a amount of money which is large to take account of the fact that we have many more of those kind of businesses here than most places. And the other good thing, talking to Andrew Jarvis, who's the Windermere Council, he's also the finance portfolio holder at South Lakeland. They've been given permission to use some of the leftover money they were given for the people who didn't fall through the gaps through the grants. So what you should get very soon, and just look out for it, is the ability to apply and bid into. And the downside is that the business rates register was an easy way of communicating the availability of the grants. If you're not business registered business, we'll have to be more creative in getting the news out there, but I will make sure that we do that, and it should be in.
Great, that's brilliant, Tim. And people like ourselves can help with that. Myself and Soph sit on Bonus and Windermere Forward. We're sending out updates each week. I know the Chamber of Trade are doing the same thing in our local area, and we're making sure that all those links are on our email updates. So we will try and get the word out there as much as possible as well. So do look out for that information coming and subscribe to us if you haven't done already. Girls, are you happy with that? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you very much.
No problem. Could I ask you to mute yourself, because I'll probably forget. I've got a question now from John. Dan, you've been able to sit quietly for a few minutes, but I think John Haley from Edwin Thompson has a question for you. So I'm going to unmute him now. Hi, John.
Hi, everyone. It's actually probably a question for all the panel. What I felt was missing from the Prime Minister's address on Sunday, and to some extent in the follow-up briefings, and which is very pertinent to Cumbria, was any form of update on guest houses, hotels and holiday lets. And I just thought that managed in the correct way, these will be a very important and effective way of regenerating the Cumbrian economy as and when the further restrictions are lifted. I just wondered, is the panel aware of any policies being developed for what could be, one of our most important staycation markets we've ever had? And I know we've talked about not wanting people to come back immediately because there'll be limited access to tourist attractions. But if it's dealt with in a structured way, it really could benefit us. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on the timescales for that.
Hang on, Dan. I think you might be muted. One moment. Let me just unmute you. Yeah, you are. Have you muted? There you go. You're open, Dan.
You need to do it first. The answer is yes. There has been some information fed into government via DMOs to visit Britain who are coordinating a lot of this. Originally, a lot of the information was pulled together by Cornwall, which I've seen, which shows a risk factor for various different parts of the visitor economy. What it shows is self-catering as the lowest risk factor, followed by hotel accommodation, followed by bars and restaurants, followed by leisure and spa. Now, bars and restaurants are not only in areas like ours, they're the lifeblood and they're part of the vibrancy of towns and cities throughout the country as well. So they will form a very, very significant part of the reopening guidance that we do get from government. We at Cumbria Tourism and here at Langdale have seen a lot of people assuming that self-catering will come first. We've had a real clamour of operators in the last 48 hours who are desperate to get open, even before government advice comes out. So we're just assimilating that and working on that at the moment. But again, locally here, our visitor economy is not always the same as everywhere else. The self-catering that you get on a caravan park or even a location like Langdale where each of the units is separate, people could in theory isolate, keep themselves to themselves, bring their own food, go for a walk, not come into contact with anyone else. It's very different to apartments that are very close to each other, to small terraced houses that are often people living in one and the next door one is rented out. So locally that presents its own problems, and the benefit in normal times of having a really diverse range of experiences, operators and options is part of our unique, well, maybe not unique, but part of our fantastic selling point, part of the draw for a lot of our visitors. But when it comes to reopening and kickstarting and getting our economy going, presents a whole new set of problems in itself. A great example of the last time I went to one of these, we were sat in the Boaters Bar, and actually I was sat in there on the 23rd of March when the information came through with a couple of my peers. On any other normal Friday, I could be sat in the Cumbria bar, and for anyone knows the difference, how do you apply the same legislation and the same guidance to both of those outlets? So it's a challenge, but it will, I'm sure it will come, and it will probably come for us via Visit Britain. I think will be the conduit where a lot of it will come from, following whatever the government statements are.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Joe, I think you've got your hand up there to say something.
Yeah, thank you. On this one, government has just announced today some task forces to invite industry experts to come forward to help develop the guidance for rolling back particular sectors. So the thing for us is we really need to make sure that people from Cumbria who really understand our economy are involved in those groups to make sure that we can take a really sensible approach that works for us. So that's been announced today. And the other thing that we're asking for, we talked earlier about the furlough scheme. The Chancellor's confirmed that there'll be no changes to the current scheme until we've gone beyond July. The conversation I was having with senior officials yesterday is we need a much more nuanced approach, and for sectors that have been particularly affected, they do need some kind of special treatment, because what we need is those that can go back to work to go back to work as soon as possible, as long as it's safely, to allow there to be sufficient funding to be able to cover those sectors that are going to take that much longer. So that's a conversation that we hope to continue, and we said we would pick up in this group I talked about next week, the visitor economy specifically as a main agenda item. Thanks, Janet.
All right, that's all right, Joe, no worries. Tim, is there anything you want to add to that?
Oh, well, very quickly. I think that it's, I've been of the view that talking publicly about relaxing the lockdown has been a bit dangerous, because it encourages people to stop behaving safely sooner than they should, so to speak. But I also think that preparing for it is vital. And so I know that locally a number of people we've cavilled via Cumbria Tourism and indeed via the District Council to try to present to government safe ways that parts of the visitor economy could reopen. at the point that that is wise. And yeah, and Dan's sort of sliding scale of what is safer and what is more high risk sounds about right to me. I think that also then leads us on to the point that Joe made about needing to be nuanced about the furlough scheme. The difficulty we're going to have is that, okay, businesses that can reopen and can make a living and generate some kind of income, even if it's not what they might have done normally, it's reasonable to expect them to contribute to the salaries of their staff. But for those for whom there is no way of operating at all and generating any serious revenue at all, it'll be the end of them if we ask them to contribute a significant or any proportion of staff salary. So it does need to be different for each sector. And the danger is that some of those categories of, or parts of the, particularly the hospitality and tourism sector and those bits of retail that are integrated with that, is that if in reality you're only opening the doors in October, well, that's straight into the fallow season, isn't it? That's straight into the famine after you've missed the feast. 3 winters in a row, I heard someone describe it as. Yeah. And so I think we have to be prepared, and the taxpayer needs to be prepared to see hospitality and tourism are certainly those aspects of the industry that are most rigidly affected. We need to see them through to next March. Otherwise, put bluntly, it was a waste of money supporting them in the first place, because all we do is postpone the collapse. So we do need to, and to be fair to government, the fact they made this announcement yesterday gives you some hope and encouragement that they will, in the end, provide us with that kind of support. But I'd rather they told us now, because it'd stop a lot of people fretting.
Yeah, I imagine there's, well, I'm part of that. There are a lot of sleepless nights going on for very many people. I'm just going to quickly go into the chat, because there's a question here from Tommy Mazia. I hope I pronounced it right, Tommy, who is the Windermere Speakeasy, and it is back to this self-employed issue. And he's just said that I have a question, maybe somebody knows the answer. If you became self-employed late last year, but the majority of your income was from being employed and submitted your tax return, you don't qualify for self-employment support grant. Is there any other support? Does anybody want to pick that up from the panel, please? Anybody know?
I'm just checking the guidance for you, Janet, because I think it changed, it eased slightly. But what we can do is take it offline and we can follow up the specifics, because it was about when did you put your accounts in? And I think there was a slight softening, but I need to look properly to see.
Oh, Soph is waving frantically, apparently. Soph, are you not unmuted? Do you want to say something? Soph wants to speak. Soph, where are you? Maybe she's not unmuted. Let's find her. I think we've lost her.
Hello, hi, sorry. It will be really interesting, and we will take the specifics of it offline. I think that is something, there are so many stools that we're all falling through. My husband, Thomas, is exactly like you, employed for a really long time, then went self-employed, and it's universal credit for now. That sounds really depressing, but that is the God's honest truth of that situation. But make sure that you're doing that as a minimum until any of the other help comes through.
Okay, and again, if members of the panel do find out any information, please do feed it through to us, and we will feed it out to people as well. That's great. John, are you okay there?
Tim's got his hand up. Tim's got his hand up. He's got his pen up.
Tim's got his hand up. Why can't Tim speak? Tim, speak. You shouldn't be on mute. You've disappeared. Maybe I muted you. I don't know. Sometimes.
Zoom. Put me back on mute, otherwise I'm going to ruin this for everyone.
Sorted. Sorry about that. I muted myself because the landline rang and then I couldn't unmute, so I apologise. Yeah, look, just to say, the specific cases, any of you have got, if you are finding you're struggling to engage, whether it be with universal credit or any other issue to getting additional support, that's what we're doing. Sort of day by day is getting to under the skin of issues for people and just trying to get them an answer and advocating to try and get you the support. So offline, any of you with any particular problems, you don't want to mention them publicly, just tim@timfarron.co.uk, and we'll do everything we can to help.
Thanks, Tim. I can actually vouch for that as well. I rang Tim to ask if he'd come and speak here, and he very kindly asked how myself and Soph were doing, and I basically cried and said, we have no money and nobody will give us any. And
we laugh, but we cry.
But he was extremely helpful and had his team on it the very next day. So we encourage you to definitely do go and speak to Tim and his team. They're doing absolutely stunning work out there to make sure that we don't fulfill those gaps that keep coming up. I was going to go to Geraldine, but I think Geraldine thinks that a question has been answered by Joe. So I'm going to push on to Heather Walker, who is from Eden Arts, and we've got a bit of a creativity question coming up, I think, so from Heather. So Heather, I'm unmuting you now.
Hello. Yeah, I just wanted to say, so Eden Arts, especially through the 66 project, are considering the role of art and culture can play in a post-COVID world looks like, and looking especially at addressing the issues of how we attract more young people to work and live here. And I'd just be interested to hear from the panel what their thoughts were on the role of culture in this time.
So I can probably just give a brief introduction that Joe can pick up on. The visitor economy is not just accommodation, bars and restaurants. It's everything that everybody comes here for, including arts, culture, landscape, sports, and everything else. And we all need to not forget that people don't just come here for the inside of a hotel room or the inside of a pint glass, although both I can sell to them at any point they like. It is really important. The visitor economy subgroup within the LEP and the culture subgroup work together on that, and there are lots and lots of partnerships going on all the time. You know, we have a partnership with Lappin Arts, with visitor attractions. They do work constantly together. But now you're absolutely right. Now, when we do start to look at the recovery plans and our marketing campaign, certainly the Cumbria Tourism marketing campaign, when it does kick off, very much includes the cultural sector alongside the accommodation sector, visitor attractions, and landscape as well. So you're absolutely right, but that work is happening behind the scenes, both at a Cumbria Tourism level, a local enterprise level, but also just at an operator level. You'll be surprised how much actually is going on behind the scenes already. Over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Dan. Well, Heather, you already know that I think that creative and cultural is critical to the placemaking and place shaping in Cumbria. So we've been working to develop our creative and cultural strategy. We're already, as Dan said, having conversations about how, as our visitor economy does brilliant work on pre-start, restart, reboot, rethink, we can pull through the creative and cultural because there's so many synergies and alignments. So absolutely, we see that a very broad offer that meets the needs of all of our existing communities and citizens, but also speaks to people that we want to attract to Cumbria in the future, is absolutely important.
Super. Tim, is there anything you want to add to?
Well, I think that so first of all, the role of culture in the and creativity in getting people through this peculiar time is massive. I think that the place of arts and culture in developing, well, the Cumbrian brand, shall we say, is critical as well, and not just the stuff that is the heritage stuff, not just the Wordsworth, Beatrix Potter, Ruskin, and so on. The ability, I think, for us to be able to give space for creativity, I just think, obviously, as a commercial thing, is massively important. I mean, so for Kendal, the Comic Arts Festival, for instance, and in the past, Mint Fest and things like that, have massively helped to kind of put us on the map, to kind of slightly change the way people see us as a visitor destination, as indeed a place to live. But they're also about as Joe says, shaping the kind of place we are now, we feel about the place. Heather's point about young people, I think, is really, really important too. I'm mindful that you know, we're talking a lot at the moment for obvious reasons about how old we are as a community. And the average age of South Lakes is 10 years above the national average. That's the way it is. Having said that, I have noticed in the last 5-10 years, largely because of the improvement of broadband and OneSense, and also because of people maybe reappraising what's important to them in life, and this experience will surely encourage more people to do that. Younger people seeking to make a living here if they can. And very often that's people who are creative or indeed directly within the arts and culture. And then also the creative industries are what make it an attractive place to come and want to settle, raise your kids and what have you. So I think that the creative industries are utterly crucial to the economy, but also to what it feels like to be a Cumbrian.
Yeah. Okay. All right, brilliant. Thank you for that, guys. I can see lots going on in the chat. I know there's a question in there about construction, and there's some stuff coming up there about weddings as well. We will try to get to as many of you as possible, I promise. Some of the questions might get answered as we go along, because there are some of those points being raised in the pre-submitted questions, so bear with us. We will try and get to all of you. I've got a question now from the lovely Maria from Hawkshead Relish. I'm just gonna hand it to you, Maria, because it's a huge question, and I know you've been busy dealing with people directly down in Parliament as well, and you've got lots going on behind the scenes. I am just going to say, however, what a cracking job you are doing on social, keeping everybody's spirits up. So, Maria, I am trying to unmute you, and I am coming to you as soon as that happens.
Okay. Hello, everybody. This is absolutely brilliant. I'm really impressed with how it's working, because my previous attempt to do something with Zoom was a disaster. Basically, what I wanted to say to everybody is that from next Tuesday, I think it is, I've got a one-to-one meeting, a Zoom meeting, with Graham Stewart MP, who's Minister for Trade. Or international trade. And so what I've got a list of things for him, and I've got about 3/4 of an hour to talk to him. So really, I'm just putting it out there that if anybody else has got anything that they would like me to raise, email me and let me know. And whilst, as Tim said, you know, that they are listening at the moment, and they're not just listening, they're acting upon things as well, because it's such an ever-moving picture. And so if there is anything that I can put their way and ask about, but it is to do with international trade rather than local or anything like that. And then I would just wanted to say thank you to Dan for mentioning the fact that the supply chain for the hospitality industry has been decimated, and we are sitting here. People think that food industries are carrying on as normal, and I can say we are doing a bit, but nothing like anything that we should be doing. And we're caught in a difficult situation between having a few orders coming in, so we need to do some work, but not enough work coming in that requires enough staff. So Mark and I are running around like headless chickens trying to do it all, and relearning skills that I thought I'd passed on to other people to do years ago. Finally, can I just say I'm interested and saddened really on Joe Lappin saying that Cumbria is going to be one of the worst hit economies, and I understand the reason for that, but I think what we haven't got to underestimate is our resilience here. We got through foot and mouth, we got through Storm Desmond, we will get through this as well.
And can I come back, Maria, because I agree absolutely wholeheartedly. I talked about the Visser economy, the sector that has been worst impact, having tons of energy, creativity and innovation to move beyond this. And the only reason I mention it is because I get quite concerned about the number of poor news stories around Cumbria. You know, worst for disease, worst affected places in the country. The bit for me is that we've got to think very carefully outside of our family about how some of these messages play and the way that we want to send those messages in a realistic but a looking to the future and working together to address some of these challenges. So totally agree.
I'll put my email address in the chat box so that anybody, if they have got a question, they can just email me.
Brilliant.
Before Monday, please.
Thank you, Maria. That was going to be my very next point. Is it open in the chat box for that specific reason? And I think your concerns about the way the furlough is working and the fact that there's now been mention of part-time furlough staff coming back and all that sort of thing is going to be
critical.
Really yeah, absolutely. For a lot of people, there's not quite enough work to get them back full time. Oh no, sorry, there's not enough work. There's not quite the finances to have them back full time.
Well, both, yeah.
So absolutely, that's going to be really important. So thank you for that. So anybody who thinks that they may have some questions that they'd like Maria to put to the Minister of Trade next week, please do send her an email. She's putting it in the chat as we speak, and we will send all the links that have come through this afternoon out in an email at the end of this as well. Okay, thanks, Maria. Okay, I am going to move on to the lovely Ken Royal. Probably one of my favourite human beings in the world because he's so nice. Ken has got a couple of questions. Ken, I think you could probably roll this into one-ish a bit if you can. I'm going to unmute you, and I know the question is to the panel as a whole. So, Ken, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's clear that the most pressing thing right now is the financial situation for everybody and how we're going to survive immediately. But we're so far into this already that it's essential to start thinking about recovery and potentially how this area is going to be resilient for the future, for what, as Tim alluded to, is likely to be a multi-year situation. It's not just now. So it's great to hear that, you know, the LEP is working with Berg and Cumbria Tourism are working with Visit Britain, and you know, there is already activity happening behind the scenes. It's incredibly reassuring to hear that, and I think the transparency of this is really important because this information is not getting out. And I read earlier this week that there's been a group formed in South Lakes that to plan for the district's economic recovery. That this has been, and I think Tim is involved with this. And this was just a small snippet of a paragraph that we heard with representatives from the local authorities and local businesses. Again, there's no transparency with this. And I'd like to emphasize the really importance for, I think, for everybody in these circumstances, that transparency of thinking for the future is really critical to help us get through this, to help people see through this. So that group that's been formed in South Lakeland, perhaps I'd like to ask Tim, is what's the political authority, what's the authority of this group? Is it an ad hoc group that's been formed? And as an adjunct to that, Einstein said, you can't get out of a situation using the same thinking that you had, that got you into it. And, you know, just what kind of innovation is being involved in this thinking? Perhaps this is also a question for Joe. How much innovative thinking is being brought into the situation to look at what we might do very, very differently in the future to make sure that we're resilient?
Tim, over to you.
Grand, yeah, Ken, great questions. I mean, so just to quickly answer the specific about the South Lakeland group, yes, there is a South Lakeland group which is chaired by Robin Ashcroft, who's a councillor in Grange, and he's the cabinet member for business, and in a previous life he helped liberate the Falklands, so this should be a piece of cake. But seriously, what's the authority of it? Well, I mean, one of my favourite phrases is "you make your own luck," and the whole point of it is that we make our own luck. So in one sense, we are assuming authority and just trying to bring people together. Many other things are going on separately, which are equally brilliant, to give people the opportunity to think about and plan for, in short order, now we know it's coming quickly, for some kind of unwinding of the lockdown. how we are able to make the best use economically and most safely of the new opportunities that are coming. And so there are a handful of, you know, political types, but it's a very small handful. The rest of it are business people. Cumbria Tourism, LEP, individual businesses are involved in that group. And it's informal, but acting though it's formal, because I think, as I said earlier on, and I've been talking to Robin about this for about a month now, I think that I have thought for some time that talking about unwinding the lockdown encourages non-compliance, but planning for it is absolutely essential, and it has been going on for a little while. And just the thing about, you know, what happens next, I mean, what Maria was saying earlier on, I absolutely take seriously about, you know, so what South Lakes is, they have the Cumbria is the most hit economy. The actual phrasing, I think, if we remember rightly, of that RSA study, is that Eden is the second most, and South Lakeland the fourth most exposed economy in the country, which is slightly different to hardest hit. It basically means we're in a kind of marginal position. It means that there are things that could go very badly wrong and very badly right. And I think that, so we talked about a couple of things that may well work massively in our favour. Thing one, the ability or the likelihood of staycations being not just chosen, but, you know, necessary for people for coming years. The other thing, let's just say it bluntly, one of the upsides of having an older population is you've got a higher proportion of the local consumer base whose incomes have not actually been affected by all this, and who still have whatever spending power there and thereabouts that they had at the beginning of all this. And so I think we should remember that, yes, because the importance of hospitality and tourism, that puts us in a position which is high risk, it's also high opportunity. But as I said at the beginning, absolutely essential in all this is not to get told what to do from the top, but to make our own luck, which is what we're kind of trying to do.
Okay.
Can I
Go on, yeah, sorry.
To back up what Tim said, I also sat on the first meeting of the group you refer to, as did Jamie, who I think is here today. The group was planned before coronavirus, regeneration was a thing. And my understanding, although it's still to be completely clear, is that it was to look at the long-term opportunities economically for South Lakeland, not the short-term recovery. Although short-term recovery is taking up everybody's attention, and justifiably so. That's not good.
Okay.
And thanks, Janet. And Ken, you asked the question. In terms of the group that I've talked about, Berg, that's the formal group of the Local Resilience Forum under the Civil Contingencies Act, as I said. And that is a very, very inclusive group that pulls in all of the district councils, as I said earlier, sector panel leads, business representative organisations. So I hope that does have a constituent that gives it legitimacy in terms of taking forward the agenda. In terms of the question you ask, I think that's spot on, and that's what I describe as rethink. If we really, really want to move out of where we are now in a position that makes us stronger, more resilient, we're really going to have to think differently about some of our assumptions on the way that economies work, the way that we do business, being more fleet of foot. And for me, it's really thinking about where are those opportunities and how do we work collectively to make them happen. Because I'm optimistic. I think there are lots of things in Cumbria that we could really do differently, and where we could be national leaders on lots of these agendas. So that's what we're doing in our rethink piece. Not doing what we've always done, not thinking incrementally, but starting to think genuinely transformatory ways, which is about changing places and changing the economy. So thanks for the question.
That's excellent to hear, and it's wonderful to know that that's happening. I think it does give grounds for optimism, and optimism is really important right now. I would just again invite wherever it's possible to make this communication maybe even an online forum that everybody could look into as to what's happening and how the thinking is changing, and invite input from as many people in as many sectors as possible. I think that's very important as well, is that communication. But thank you, and it's great to know that.
We've got a specific web page that links to lots of different things, but Ken, I think that's a great idea. We do loads of social media and invite people to feed in, but with Berg, we'll take up your forum and give us your ideas. That'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Super, thank you, Joe. Just carrying on with that, just very, very briefly, because there's still a heck of a lot to get through. So you've put a comment in the chat. I don't know if in relation to this issue. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that.
Well, no, it's fine. I'll leave it in the chat. I think essentially what everyone is saying is absolutely right, and it's great to hear that there's so much forethought being put into what can happen on the other side of this. Cumbria, really, right now, we are kind of at an amazing advantage. I know we are potentially at the highest risk and all the rest of it, but the fact that all of this digital transformation has been massively, massively forced on us, we now no longer need to work in offices. Look what we're doing right now. We've got 100 people sat in a room. We're all connecting. We're all interacting. It's really put Cumbria, I mean, last year we did the LA23NET about digital nomads. That was kind of at the heart of it, and how Cumbria could potentially refigure its kind of branding from a working perspective to attract more people to the area. And really, this is kind of our moment. And if we work really hard together to make the most of the fact that this kind of thing is going to become more of the norm, Cumbria really could capitalize on our amazing landscape and everything else that comes with it. Yeah, I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move it on. We have a question coming up from Caroline Langham, who is the owner and wedding planner at Coat Howe. It's a detailed question. Obviously, the wedding industry has been pretty badly, no, that's actually an understatement, isn't it? It's been badly hit by COVID-19, and for the brides and grooms and all their guests and families and friends, it's been a devastating time. And I think also in the room is Weddings by Annabelle, and I know we've had a few questions about weddings, and there's been lots and lots of stuff in the press about the wedding industry and what's been going on there. So I'm gonna open the floor to you, Caroline, and let you get your question out there. Maybe I'm not. Yes, I am.
Hi.
There you go.
Hello, can you hear me? Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. This is fantastic. This is a great way to connect with everybody, as you said. My question mainly is to Tim, of course, our great advocate, but to anybody in the panel that can help, because I haven't met Joe before or Dan. So yes, as Janet's already said, the wedding industry seems to be getting attacked from all angles at the moment, particularly in the press. I have a very long question that I typed out, Janet, but I'm a bit worried about spending so long reading it out, so I'm just going to recap, if that's okay. Basically, there's a lot of people out there that do weddings as well, and so I just wanted to start off by saying, we started off after COVID-19 hit, joining an organisation that was actually started out by Bridebook to help wedding venues all communicate together and support each other and talk about the issues that they were facing so that everybody could support each other. This has now developed a little bit further, and it might be helpful for a lot of people on here today to be aware of that. So there's an organisation called the Association of British Wedding Businesses, and their web address is abwb.org. So this is now going to be our new wedding industry body, so that hopefully we've got a port of call and a voice in the wedding industry. So for the likes of any kind of problems or support or documentation or a voice going forward, hopefully we've got some place where we can go for help and advice. We can all stick together and help each other. So that would be great for a lot of people on here that might not be aware of what's happening out there. So that would be great. My question really was, Tim at the moment has been doing a wonderful job. We're always emailing him with all of our problems, as a lot of people do. our biggest one when it first started was mainly around insurance. I know that a lot of people have been saying in the chat about the interruption insurance being a problem. I think Tim and a lot of MPs and other people have been lobbying certain groups to get the FCA looking into this. So I think hopefully we'll get some help with that. The second thing, not just the business interruption, of course, is that wedding couples do take out wedding insurance. What we're finding with our wedding couples is we only have 30% of our weddings actually take the wedding insurance, which is a problem for us as a venue. So I don't know whether a lot of other venues are in the same situation as us, but we only do weddings. We don't do any other ancillary work. We're not a bar or a hotel. We haven't got a spa or a restaurant. We literally do weddings only, and we're a private venue and we're closed in between those weddings. So all of our entire income is based around weddings. The recent problems that we've faced have even outscaled completely the insurance problems. It's sort of linked, but you may not be aware, but the CMA have started putting out recent updates on the guidance, and there's been a lot of people jumping on the back of this. The likes of Martin Lewis, the BBC, Witch Magazine, all seem to be sort of doing a bit of a witch hunt on wedding venues. And fair enough, there might be some people out there that are a bit unscrupulous and are not actually being fair. Because at the end of the day, we're in a situation where venues, it's not their fault, and the couples, it's not their fault. And we're all trying to work together to find a harmonious solution. So wherever possible, we're trying to postpone weddings free of charge. But obviously there's a limit to how far you can go as a business to stretch out that generosity, if you like. A lot of wedding couples are saying, no, I'm not interested in an October wedding or a December wedding. I want my wedding next summer, and I want you to be able to give me that free of charge. This is the problem that we're facing. And the likes of Martin Lewis and Witch Magazine or the BBC even are jumping on couples' sob stories and really focusing in on the bad news around, oh, my venue is charging me X amount to rebook my wedding again, etc., and quoting now the CMA back to us, sort of saying, we've been told we have 100% refund, blah, 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 blah. Well, actually, the CMA guidance is very clear. Where you have a wedding, for example, and it isn't, so they're lumping us in with nurseries and flights. So saying that if you can't have your wedding because the government has closed you down, go to your wedding venue. The insurance companies are saying to people, go to your wedding venue, and everybody is bullying the wedding venues to refund the money. The problem that we have is about 70% of all of our costs are incurred before the wedding day. That might be in the infrastructure, the planning process, the booking, all of your sales and marketing. Everything goes into your wedding way before the wedding day. And your wedding day itself isn't something that we just wake up that morning and we go, oh, we'll have a wedding. You know, there's a lot of work actually goes into the prep of that wedding. Now, the CMA guidance are very clear that where you have had a service or incurred costs, you are not necessarily entitled to a full refund. What we would like, and we desperately need help, is to actually get that message across. The CMA reissued their report, I think on the 30th of April, with headline news. You know, you are entitled to a 100% refund. Well, you're not. And this is, you know, it's being badly put across, and the CMA guidance themselves are not putting across point 4, which is, they're only reading out the first 3 lines, not the 4th line. So we desperately need help in the wedding industry to redress that balance and make sure that media are treating us fairly and actually getting a fair, reasonable response across. So that was our first part of our question. It's really difficult.
Let's give Tim a moment to see. There's a long question. Let's give Tim a moment to see if he can respond to that. Tim.
Yeah. By the way, I'm just literally voting in the division on the first clause of the agriculture bill. So it's all this is no queuing through a lobby. But it's the bell has just gone, but I've got it muted. Let me just submit a vote. I've voted the right way.
You want me to make a comment?
I was going to, yeah, it'd be really interesting, Dan.
For a lot of us, and there's a few people on this call, Karen, Paul, and a few others who are directly involved as venues, going back to what me and Maria and I were saying earlier, there's a huge supply chain around the industry in this area. There's venues, flowers, there's photographers. Yeah, Ian's on the call somewhere, and a whole supply chain and industry built up around people coming here and people who live here having their weddings around here. And obviously that, along with a lot of other business, is switched off at the moment. And also with potential limits to gatherings in the future, we have no idea when and how that's going to be changed with social distancing at venues, at events and so on. We really don't have any idea. And Caroline's summary of her question, long though it was absolutely right. But just a few things. The CMA is guidance, and the competitions and market authority are there to provide guidance. It's up to people who are affected to challenge, and the guidance will form any decisions that lawyers, solicitors, or particularly trading standards may take based on that guidance. So if you're operating within the guidance, then you're doing fine. It's where people operate outside the guidance, particularly around travel refunds. It really came to the media's attention around travel refunds, particularly around flights, hotel stays, and package holidays, was where it really came. So it is guidance, and if you're within that guidance, then you're fine. That doesn't necessarily stop you having a fight with your bookers, though, and it doesn't stop your bookers going to the press or TripAdvisor or whatever threats they might use. And that's very, very much down to each individual business about their inclination to push their terms and conditions as hard as they want to. You clearly have nothing else apart from weddings. It's exactly the same. 2008, lots and lots of businesses were just as reliant on meetings and events, corporate events, as people are on weddings now. That business disappeared to pretty much zero in 2008 and has again gone to zero now. So there are significant segments of our of our hotel operation or our wedding venue operation that will take a very, very long time to bounce back. I know that when we talk to places like, and I can name a few, Castle Green, Lowood, us to a degree, meetings and events, corporate meetings and events is a big, big part of our businesses. We probably won't see that until this time next year, if not later, if we're lucky at all, because everybody's going to be on Zoom instead. So there's not just weddings. There are lots of other areas that are affected. But my advice would be to try and get the balance of keeping to your T's and C's and keeping your reputation is a very, very difficult balance to achieve, but one that you need to think about them both together all the way along. And the CMA is for guidance, and it's up to people to challenge that guidance, but it will support any challenges to that.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Tim, I am going to come to you in a second. I think one of the issues for Caroline as well is that, is there any way of putting some pressure on the CMA to be a bit clearer in their guidance? Is there any way to sort of lobby for that to happen?
Sorry, can I just go back on that? The CMA guidance is very, very clear. It's up to people to challenge it. So it's up to people to challenge between bookers and venues. The CMA provides the guidance for that challenge. It's not law or legislation in itself. It's guidance for people to challenge.
Okay. Tim, did you want to add something?
Yeah, very helpful indeed, Dan. And I think Caroline's questions are excellent. And I think, obviously, speaking for a particular sector, but I'm sure for other people as well, I think the first thing to say is that it's encouraging that out of all this, there is if you like, a kind of professional body that's grown out of it, and a reminder that these kind of things can get the best out of us. And I think the worry, I guess the last point that we've been talking about the encouragement for customers to treat businesses as the bad guy is really deeply worrying. This is a kind of shared crisis, and it doesn't help when people who are in authority positions and publicly well known and respected start treating businesses as though these are the bad guys of the piece. And when Caroline, you and lots of other businesses in your position have been trying in a very generous way to find a kind of compromise, and I think that is absolutely fair. And there is shared cost in this process, and we haven't to we haven't to assume that basically small businesses have to be dumped on because there is public support for the customer and total defiance from the insurer, and which leads us on to that issue in terms of the insurance industry. I mean, I think the government has been very, very cautious about putting pressure on them. I think they fear that if people have to pay out, then that will massively hammer the government industry. Having said that, there's much about this current experience that we're going through which has been beneficial to the insurance industry. I mean, there's not been a right lot of car accidents in the last couple of months, so it's not all one way. And I think that we're perhaps cutting them a bit too much. Well, we are cutting them a lot more slack than we should be. But I mean, I think, Caroline, you've got a unique and an outstanding offer, and I think that it's about making sure that, I suppose, as I've said about other businesses, thinking through, and then through me and other people, coming up with a plan about what a safe reopening sooner rather than later might look like. Because if we can then put that in front of ministers and others and say, look, this is possible, then the chances of us being able to reopen safely sooner are much greater. If we leave it to the policy wonks in London to think, that's not possible, then it will be later. So I just think that it is, I'm sure you are doing that, and I've obviously had a wonderful time wandering around your place with you a few months ago and getting the sense of what a glorious place it is. I guess doing that yourself and thinking about, how could I make this work differently, more safely, and in which case, if we can present that to the powers that be, we're much more likely to get you can open sooner from them.
Yeah. I think the Association of British Wedding Businesses has already put together a paper, and they've already involved with the task force to do that. There was another question that popped up.
I'm going to stop you, Caroline, because I am really conscious that we're running out of time. I know there's loads of questions.
That's fine.
Don't worry, you will get the chance to speak to Tim, I'm sure. Like I say, he's always available by email. It would be great, though, Caroline, if you could put the details of the Association of British Wedding Businesses link in the forums so that people have got that information. I know there were a few comments as you were talking about people's issues with the CMA, so it's obviously not just the wedding industry. I saw Matt Harnett come up there, he's in self-catering, and so there's issues for other services as well that are being impacted. So if you could give us that link, that would be great. I am really conscious that this afternoon is flying. We've still got a few more questions, and I really would like to try and get some comments in about the insurance and business interruption, because it's been a massive issue for everybody, and who knows what that is all about. Suddenly our business interruption that we have all been paying for many years, it just doesn't count. So I do want to get a question in about that as well if we can. I'm going to go to Graham Hadaway. I was going to come to Simon Whitman, but I think, Simon, I'm hoping that with all the discussions that have gone on so far, your question has pretty much been answered. I'm going to try and bring Graham Hadaway in, if he is going to come up. I don't think Graham's here anymore. Is Graham Hadaway still in the... Oh, is he still here? Graham and Miles, would that be Graham? Yeah, okay, let's go with that. Graham, I'm going to unmute you and give you the opportunity to speak. Go for it.
Yeah, I think actually mine's already been answered, Janet. It was mainly around the sort of furlough scheme. It sounds like Westminster, and you're making them aware of sort of the need for long-term support for hospitality, and it sounds already like that's being handled with. So I don't want to waste the time on that. But it was mainly just saying, are they looking ahead and to next March and going, we need support through till then? But it sounds like that's going to happen, or could happen.
Hopefully that's going to happen. Okay, so you're happy with the responses so far from the panel, Graham?
Yeah, just a quick comment on that, Janet, if that's all right. So the government have not said it's going to happen.
No.
But we have asked them to do it, and I think that the announcement of the extension of the furlough scheme, although to October, to what, sorry?
To October, Tim.
October.
Yeah.
Is welcome, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a clue that they are thinking ahead. But so I think we need to continue the pressure on government, because they've not yet said yes to the hospitality and tourism package through to next March, which I've asked them for. But I have put down what's called an early day motion, which is a written motion to Parliament, and I've had signatures from MPs from all parties, and nowhere near a majority yet, but it does look like it's building ahead of steam.
And do they understand, do they kind of get why you're asking for it? Do they see the reasons for that?
I think so, because I guess most of them realise, now I guess the hospitality sector in London is much more of an even, there's an all year round season. Here there is, of course, as well, but not to the same extent. We know we operate on feast and famine. And I think people definitely get that in the national parks and in the coastal towns, that hospitality is a seasonal enterprise. It works on the basis of feast and famine. We entered lockdown just at the end of the famine. There is no feast. We'll be thrown back out there at the beginning of the next famine unless they give us the bridge to take us into spring 2021. So I think the logic of that is clearly taken. My sense is they're doing the sums to see what they can afford. So I think with the arguments being well made, there's definitely people joining us almost every day to say they agree, yes, this should happen. We are a special case. But we just need to keep up the pressure because then, yes, but I hope they will.
Okay, great, thank you.
Graham, can I add to that? The group that I referred to is very, very clear about key issues around seasonality of particular sectors and the need to think in a very different way about those sectors. So the agreement, given the recognition of the particular needs and challenges of the visitor economy, is that their next meeting next week is going to dedicate some specific time to the sector. So I think there is definitely listening in the centre about how this sector needs a different kind of support than others.
Yeah, it'd be great if, as obviously it's certain to anything, but in the next month, if we can even get some sort of idea that can continue till next March, it would save a lot of wasted time in planning to reopen something which then you may not actually need to, and give a lot of security for jobs.
Yep.
Absolutely. Brilliant, thank you. Super. Okay, Emma Porter has been chomping at the bit to ask a few questions. I know there's some issues around construction. Emma is part of the Story Group, and I'm pleased to see that you've got your virtual nose propped up against the virtual window on the waiting room, Emma, and I've unmuted you, so go for it.
Yeah, I snuck in from the virtual waiting room. I mean, I just wondered, Tim, what your view was on construction. I know previously you were kind of saying construction shouldn't, or non-essential construction shouldn't be open. I just wondered whether that had changed after the announcement on Sunday, or whether kind of obviously you'd had some feedback that made you think it shouldn't be open, and I'm just kind of, I obviously think it should be, but I just wanted to hear like what your view was, if you still had concerns or if you felt more reassured that it was the right time now.
Yeah, I mean, there's been quite a lot of stuff going on locally recently, because, for example, there's a significant number of, highways works, bridge works and what have you, that the county can do with private contractors, that this last few weeks and even now is the perfect time to do. Wouldn't it be awful if you kicked off some of that kind of construction work until the point when businesses are back open, and then screw up the town centres again? So actually there's a lot of sense in with social distancing being at the heart of it all, for construction having happened all the way through this process. I think the question was more not what was going on locally, but what was going on nationally. The reality is, frankly, the only upside we've got to having terrible public transport in our area is the fact that people are not crammed into buses and tubes. So when I make a really early start in London and I'm on the bus or the tube, everybody before 7 a.m, nearly everybody before 7 a.m, is a construction work. And you've seen some of those pictures recently. And the bulk of construction, certainly a massive percentage of the construction work going on in the United Kingdom, is going on in London. And so it's not so much that construction sites are dangerous, it's the travelling to them that was dangerous. I think it's different for us, so long as, because most people get there by private car. So no, I think that construction, as long as it abides by the guidelines, like everybody's got to, it's an important part of moving the economy forward, being optimistic, and actually because construction is creative, but of course it can be disruptive in the process. Why not use a lockdown to do it? Because you therefore minimise the amount of disruption because people aren't on the roads.
Emma. Is Emma still there? Is she gone? Is she muted? Let's find you, Emma. Wow, let's just unmute you again. I don't know why you'd be muted.
Sorry, well, I muted myself because my kids were screaming in the background. I didn't want Tim Farron to think it was a complete madhouse, but I've had to admit it now. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right about the guidelines. I think almost maybe the construction is a bit of a split industry where for the larger contractors who are familiar with working with clients like Network Rail, we're so used to embracing very strict health and safety rules that actually new rules, once we get used to them, are not that difficult to embrace because we have, I mean, you can't have your hands in a pocket on a railway site. You can't walk upstairs holding a cup of coffee on a nuclear site because of health and safety. So behavioural regulations we're more than ready with. I guess there's just such a huge part of the construction industry that maybe isn't as heavily regulated, and that's possibly where the general public was seeing issues. But
no, it's a good point, and I think one of the issues that comes out of all this is that British culture has played a huge part in the lockdown being as successful as it is. However, that also means that people can be people are incredibly fearful. They're fearful of some things that they don't know, and obviously the virus is a thing we don't know, but also that every sector that they don't understand, but they fear might be doing something that is, going to reduce the effectiveness of the lockdown. People get very jumpy about that as well.
Yeah,
and I
it's
think
very visible as well, isn't it? Construction, they can see them in a high vis. I mean, intentionally visible.
But I think, this is why I do sympathise with the government situation, because if it is the right time, I'm not convinced, but if it is the right time to be relaxing the lockdown at this point, then you're going to get people who will be resistant because people are naturally fearful of this. And if you look at polling, something like 75% of the population are quite content for the lockdown to keep going. And so they almost need, if it is safe to start moving out of it, they will need some coaxing and some leadership and some evidence that it's safe to do so.
Yeah. I mean, I think...
Sorry,
sorry.
End there. We could.
Okay, sure.
Construction all day, and
I was going to talk about diversity. Are you sure?
You've got a minute. Go.
No, I'm all right. It's all right.
Okay, cool. Sorry, because you said that. That's what I always picked up.
Emma, send us an email if you want to ask anything else. I'll be happy to deal with it and answer.
Cool, thanks, Tim. We are going to wrap it up in a few minutes, but I do want to get staycation in, and I want to get business interruption in, as I said a few minutes ago. I'm not going to ask specific questions, but I'm just going to ask for the panel's views on them in just a minute. And I'm going to start the ball rolling. I think I've got Lee Wilson from Mountain Rat Adventures, whose question it's not quite staycation, but it is about people coming back during the season. So Lee, if I've unmuted a Lee, I'm hoping it's the right Lee. Is it the right Lee?
It is.
It is. Okay, Lee, go for it.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so I work for adventure activities and coming out of famine, which would be the winter season into the summer season, and falling through the cracks. I hear very little of what help is being done or how we can actually get the industry back on its feet, or at least moving in the right direction. With adventure activities, we are hands-on, so it is very difficult to socially distance. So yeah, I'm just keen to know what's kind of being done behind the scenes.
Did you get that, panel? I know it was a bit bitty on my end. Did you manage to pick up what Lee's question was there?
The main points, Janet, yeah.
Do you want, as an operator of a hospitality business, there are, very much like Lee's, there are elements of our business where, were we to open under the current or even close to our current procedures and operating, we clearly could not facilitate social distancing at 2 meters. which forms the basis of an awful lot of the requirement if you read the guidelines going forward. For example, a changing room going into a leisure club or a spa. The actual spa itself, yeah, the leisure club itself might be quite good. The serving of food and drink. The workplace in a commercial kitchen, even though commercial kitchens are large, how do I serve anything more than a very, very basic product with my staff meters apart in a commercial kitchen, where they may one station has to walk past another station to go to a fridge to get an ingredient out. How do I get people working in the bar at that? There's loads of areas where our businesses are going to have to look at what we do and seek how we fit in with the government guidance, but at the same time, we have to reinvent ourselves as well. And it's been mentioned before, innovation, the ability to deal with crises in Cumbria, you know, we're renowned for it, we thrive on it and all that kind of stuff. So we are currently not looking at how do we get our experience that we were providing up until March and deliver it a bit worse but a bit more expensive to cover all our very high costs and ensure our survival. How do we create a new post-COVID experience where somebody might be willing to pay a premium for housekeeping over the premium they pay for a spa up to 23rd of March? And so we're actively not looking at delivering a worse service than before, but looking at delivering a whole new experience and a whole new service where different things people are paying for and appreciating different things. Housekeeping is something nobody ever really took consideration of, and you never really put a value on your housekeeping when you went to stay in a hotel or accommodation provider. Come whenever we open, housekeeping is probably the most important service we're going to provide to anybody, and they should be willing to pay a premium for a really good committed housekeeping service. So that you can't necessarily reinvent your business, because taking people out and delivering some adventures for them is absolutely hands-on unless you're on a one-to-one basis. But so how we do that is in certain sectors is really challenging. How do we deliver, you know, a Pilates class in our leisure club? Maybe we take it outdoors. I don't know, but we have to look at a different way of doing our business. Yeah, just a bit worse.
Matt, did you want to add something to what Dan had said there? Or we just agree?
I think it's okay from sort of thinking of it as accommodation, but in terms of outdoor adventurous activities, the fact that half the nation could potentially come to the lakes, why are we restricted so much to taking small groups out? And the thing is, I don't really hear any help or advice coming to the adventurous outdoor activities.
A quick thought from me, and it's a bit similar to what I said in answer to one or two of the other questions earlier on. I think that particularly for you know, a business like yours and an industry like yours, if we can call it that, with lots of people involved in it around the country, there's going to be an assumption that you can't do what you do in the current circumstances. And I think that there probably are, for you, if you were the relevant minister, how would you, or people within the same business as you, how would you make it safe? And as safe as possible, not just really safe, but how would you be able to convince people it was safe? And then you've got to kind of put down on paper what that looks like. And for what it's worth, if you've got a trade body who'll do that, brilliant. But either way, I will happily present that to the relevant ministers and say, look, this is how you know, the adventure tourism sector could, in these different ways, reopen. That's how it will be done healthily and safely. And I think the scales might drop from some people's eyes. And the other thing I'd just say, really, I mean, that's a specific thing for you and for anybody else who feels that they can't see how government will allow them to reopen anytime soon. The other thing is just, I suppose, just some hope. I mean, we mentioned foot and mouth earlier. Foot and mouth is a real year zero for hospitality and tourism in the Lake District for all sorts of reasons. And much of what became the really powerful central brand forming aspects of the Lake District in the years that followed were formed out of all that. So I think there's lots to be positive about, but we have to make our own luck, and that's why I think that there will be ways, if you're operating safely, you know that, and that's why you're partly frustrated that it's not possible in the foreseeable future. So I guess put on a piece of paper how that actually looks, and then I'll try and persuade them to let it happen.
Yeah. Janet, very quick addition from me. I think one of the things that we had in our visitor economy strategy was the importance of the adventure offer. And as we're working through the recovery plan, we really need to give that some thought and talk to colleagues like Lee about how we do that and how we take that forward. And I think the other thing that I'd strongly encourage, as I said earlier, is to look out for those expert groups that are being formed currently, to think about how do people engage in the design of new guidance for those areas that are going to open up later in the process. And that's on gov.uk as we speak.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jo. That's really, really helpful. We are almost up against time, but just before we go, I don't think we got through all the questions. We've certainly got a chunk of them. Hopefully, there were quite a lot of overlaps, so hopefully most people got answers. But if there are still outstanding questions, then please do speak to Jo, to Dan, to Tim, contact them. It looks like all of them are more than willing to help you, even though their phones are burning off the hook constantly. But just before I go, just a quick, I'm going to pass on to John Haley in a minute just to do a vote of thanks. But before I do that, I'd just like to just get a quick view, because it's quite a lot in the chat throughout the afternoon. Just a quick view from each of the panellists about staycation. What do we think about that? What are our views on that? And also this business interruption issue. I know that's two massive, chunky areas. But if you could just give me very quick thoughts on both of those, I think that'd be really useful just to end on, because it's an issue that is, well, we all live here, so staycation is important. For many of us, business interruption has just been a thorn in our sides. So, Jo, you start when you're on the screen. Staycation.
Staycation, for me, it's a brilliant opportunity. None of us are going anywhere internationally anytime soon. And as part of our, you know, we're not looking for visitors now, but we very much look forward to welcoming you back. It would be brilliant if we give some serious thought as to what that offer looks like. Business interruption, we fed into government, for Janet and Soph, numerous examples of those that have submitted the claims and got absolutely nowhere. And we continue to press that there needs to be some support for those businesses that have paid premiums for years and have received nothing in return. So that's it from me, Janet. Thank you very much.
Dan.
Exactly the same as Jo on insurance. CT have fed numerous case studies into central government as well. My only, based on our experience here at Langdale, would be don't hold your breath. Certainly in terms of the staycation, we have kind of been here before in a slightly different way. There was the whole Brexit staycation thing, if you remember, a little while ago, where even the front page of national newspapers was saying everybody's going to be holidaying at home. It's going to be a golden age of domestic tourism. We're still waiting for that one, never mind the next one. So let's do the first staycation peak first, and then let's worry about the next one. However, there are structural differences this time to do with physical travel, which does make this one slightly more likely this time. So the fact that people can't travel abroad, it's just very tricky to come back when eventually we can go abroad, should encourage people to stay at home. I think a lot of people may have been sat at home long enough to reevaluate what great things they've got around them. You know, when you can't have something, suddenly it becomes really desirable. I once tried doing that dry January thing, and it's kind of a little bit like that, because by the 3rd of January I was gasping for a drink because I couldn't have one. And so let's hope a similar sort of thing applies when people can start to go and stay at places that will appreciate what's close to them and what's in their own country, a bit like I did once in dry January.
Thank you, brilliant, Dan. Thank you. I've done that dry January for many years now, and I'm managing. So far, so good. Tim, last but by no means least.
Right. Well, so on business interruption, I agree. Fundamentally, if this had been an event that only hit Windermere or only hit Cumbria even, I'm fairly sure they'd have paid up. It's just because of the scale of, because undoubtedly this is, people, they've talked, if you had pandemic insurance and you covered, I mean, this has been business interruption. People have been shut down by the government. It almost doesn't matter what the cause was. So I think on paper, the insurance companies certainly morally should pay up, but that's not how they operate. I think, frankly, the government has kind of kicked the can down the road via the grants and generally allowing the insurance companies to dig their heels in. The insurance companies are waiting for some test cases. And if it goes wrong for them, then it might go right for everybody here. And my support is very much strongly with you. Staycation, yeah, I echo everything that everybody's said. Obviously, it all depends at what point tourism and hospitality is genuinely open for here in the lakes and indeed the rest of Cumbria. But whenever it is open, it'll be open before international travel is probably. And you can have a whole bunch of people who thought they were off to wherever they were off to, suddenly thinking, if you want a holiday at all, it's got to be somewhere on these islands. Probably, you know, in England. And so I think we're in a huge advantage. And I also think that the big crises that we face in the past, foot and mouth, floods and so on, they were Cumbria specific, and they damaged our brand relatively to other places. This is not Cumbria specific. We're all in the same boat, and we happen to have the best product in the country. So I'm very hopeful that we will have a double advantage, one over overseas and the other over other parts of the country, because this is a different kind of, it's a different kind of catastrophe. So yeah, thanks, Janet. And Soph.
We will see how that one pans out. Panel, you have been amazing. The chat going up the side is full of nothing but love for the three of you. So that's a really nice way to end a Tuesday afternoon. I'm going to quickly hand over to Hayley, who is going to give you all a vote of thanks. So here's John. Maybe we'll have John. Maybe I'll be doing the vote of thanks.
Is that it now, Janet? Yeah.
We can hear you.
Great. Yeah, so hello again, everybody. John from Edwin Thompson here to give the vote of thanks to the excellent speakers on behalf of the joint sponsors, ourselves, NXT Recruitment, and also the Cumbrian Building Society. Thank you firstly to Joe. It hits home when Joe confirms that Cumbria is going to be one of the worst hit economies in the UK, and we're all in the middle of it. And Joe also mentioned our flight path, and lots of us have been realising in the last few weeks that we won't be actually going on a flight this year, but we are of course mapping out our business flight paths to the other side of this epidemic. And Joe and also I think Maria mentioned that it'll be our resilience and our strength that will get us through this, which is a really important message. So at this point, I usually start clapping and everybody else claps and you get a big round of applause, but you're just going to have to have a virtual one this time. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan, turning to you. Thank you for giving us an insight into your Sunday evening and the immediate response to Boris's briefing about protecting Cumbria, and indeed opening the public toilets, which we hope you will accomplish quite quickly. You obviously had a busy few days, and for anybody that missed it at the start, Dan's actually working tonight. He's on call through the night, listening out for fire alarms. So thank you for giving up your evening ahead of your working night, and that's your virtual round of applause too. And then finally, Tim, thank you for giving us hope on haircuts. I was holding out until this Sunday, but I'm going to have to take the plunge this week with the news that it won't be happening in the hairdressers until July. But on a serious note, everyone here appreciates the work that you're doing for us in South Lakes and Cumbria, and particularly whilst homeschooling, which we all know is very difficult. Finally, it would be great if Tim could just finish on his horror gin story. Probably not fair because we are recording this, so we're not going to ask him to do that. We'll let you off and we'll give you a virtual round of applause too.
One day when I've had a glass or three of something else, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Right, some very quick closing words, and this is when I'd normally let everybody know what's the next LA23 event, which is actually the last event of the season on Tuesday the 9th of June. The girls are still working on finalising the details, so if you could just watch out for that coming through on email and across the LA23 media and website. But I'm sure everyone agrees that this is still a great way of keeping in touch and sharing our knowledge and experiences. And I think that's been shown by, you know, a turnout of 100 today with lots of people on the waiting list. No need to leave your name badges. No need to wish you a nice, safe drive home. But we do need to give a big thank you to Sophia and Janet for their amazing organising skills, but particularly for hand delivering bottles of gin at the weekend, which is just so kind of them. So thank you to you. There's your big round of applause. And then thank you to everyone else for joining us this evening. We hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fabulous.
Oh, that was fantastic. Thank you. We didn't be sure that we didn't break any of the lockdown rules that were still in place at the weekend before Boris's announcement on Sunday night. We did post as many of them as we could and only hand-delivered less than that. So I hope that everybody enjoyed their gin. I am going to actually unmute everybody so that big round of applause that we've been talking about happen. And once I've unmuted everybody, you've all cheered and shouted and given lots of claps to all these fabulous people for being here today, to which we can only add our thanks again. I will end the meeting and everybody have a really great evening and stay safe. You can stay safe as well if you like, but stay safe and stay alert. Hey! Hey!
Thank you. I see you. Well done.
Alert is my favourite. Bye. Guys, thank you so much.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
See you later.
Thank you.